My friends, what came out of this mailbag hit Pittsburgh like a blast of cold December wind, because every answer pulled us deeper into the real decisions, doubts, and urgency shaping the Steelers right now. When you look at what's happening behind the scenes, from the cornerback rotation, to the wide receiver shakeups, to the questions around Aaron Rodgers' health and the ripple effects that come with it, you start to understand that this week against Chicago isn't just another game. It's a pressure point for the entire season, and the conversations happening inside the building reflect exactly that. Here's the translation. Before anything else, smash that like button if you're black and gold until the end. The most striking part of the information from the mailbag is how brutally honest the internal evaluation has become. The situation with Aaron Rodgers is the perfect example. After jamming his finger weeks ago and then dealing with a fractured wrist, the truth is that he has not been the same player. The coaching staff knows it, the teammates know it, the fans know it, and when Mason Rudolph stepped in and outperformed him in the second half, it wasn't some fluke. It was a direct consequence of Rodgers trying to play through injuries that are clearly affecting his throwing. But even with that reality staring them in the face, the team appears set on pushing Rodgers forward into Sunday. The question that hangs in the air is simple. Is this a brave decision, or a risky one? And that uncertainty is exactly the kind of tension that defines a season. Then there's the cornerback situation, which might be the most layered storyline of all. Asante Samuel Jr. is the center of attention, but not because he's on the verge of starting. Far from it. The coaching staff has him buried deep in the outside corner depth chart, not the slot, not a rotational hybrid role, strictly outside. And with guys like Darius Slay, James Pierre, Brandon Eccles, and even Jalen Ramsey involved in that mix, ASJ is at best 5th or 6th in line. That alone creates a real concern. If a team like Philadelphia, his father's old squad, calls him tomorrow and offers a spot on the active roster, he could walk. And honestly, no one would blame him. That's why the conversation around activating him sooner rather than later isn't just about special teams or depth. It's about not losing him entirely. The Steelers brought him in for a reason. His skill set is too valuable to risk leaving him unused until someone else decides to take him. But the wide receiver room is another storm forming. The decision to move on from George Pickens wasn't just business, it was internal pressure. The revelations from Marco's report show clearly why key veterans pushed for the separation. Chronic lateness to meetings, practices, even games. Lack of effort in blocking or route running. When leaders inside the room reach a breaking point and say they're done playing with someone, the organization has no choice but to act. And the fact that only one team, the Cowboys, was willing to part with a third-round pick reinforces how serious those concerns were. Now, the focus shifts to Roman Wilson and Calvin Austin III. The rotation has changed. Roman has essentially stepped into the WR2 role, and that feels like something driven not just by coaching evaluation but by Aaron Rodgers himself. Roman's been efficient, fast, reliable, and productive. Calvin's struggles, drops, missteps, missed opportunities opened the door, but Roman had been knocking on it for weeks. And the offense desperately needs one of these guys to assert themselves because everything this system tries to do hinges on forcing defenses to respect the threat opposite DK Metcalf. Without that, the offense becomes predictable, and predictable football in December is a losing formula. And yet, even with that need for explosiveness, the team doesn't seem eager to elevate Marquez Valdes-Scantling. His speed is real, but Wilson and Austin already have that trait, and they run cleaner routes. The issue isn't personnel, it's structure. This offense gets the ball out so fast that deeper routes never get time to develop. When these younger receivers do get targets, they're often on stop routes that don't allow for yards after catch. So the frustration with production around them becomes more complicated than simply blaming the players. Then you look at the defensive backfield again, specifically Jabril Peppers, and it becomes even more puzzling. With Ramsey and Kyle Duggar playing extremely well at safety, Peppers is stuck behind Chuck Clark for reasons that don't quite align with what we've seen on the field. His lone true game at safety, Week 3, earned him a 90+ grade in strong tape, yet he's been shifted into more of a special teams-focused role. It feels like a resource being underused, especially when one injury at safety would force the staff to choose between the more reliable player and the one they technically have placed above him. This entire week's conversation paints the picture of a team that is talented, but walking a tightrope of decisions about health, rotation, discipline, upside, and risk. And as the Steelers get ready for the Bears, every one of those choices will determine whether Pittsburgh is positioning itself for a playoff push or sabotaging its own momentum. With everything swirling around this roster, Rodgers' health, ASJ's role, the WR2 shakeup, Pepper's place in the depth chart, what do you think is the biggest storyline that could decide Sunday's outcome? Picking up right where we left off, The tension surrounding this team isn't just about individual players, it's about how every decision seems to tighten or loosen the entire structure holding the season together. And nowhere is that more evident than in how the coaching staff is juggling these roster questions heading into a matchup they simply cannot afford to mishandle. The conversation around activating Asante Samuel Jr. is a perfect example of how delicate this balance has become. On one hand, the Steelers clearly see enough talent in him to keep him in the system, but not enough trust to put him on the field yet. On the other hand, you have the very real possibility that another team could call him tomorrow and offer something Pittsburgh isn't offering right now. A direct role, a clear path to snaps, and the respect that comes from being seen as part of the present instead of a long-term maybe. That's a dangerous situation because the Steelers' depth at outside corner is finally starting to look stable, but stability can evaporate quickly if you lose a player you brought in precisely to stabilize it. If the team truly believes he's part of the solution, waiting too long to use him might ironically push him out the door before that solution ever comes to fruition. Meanwhile, the Aaron Rodgers dilemma is hanging over everything like a cloud no one wants to acknowledge but everyone can feel. There's no debate anymore, health is affecting his game. The tape is obvious. The decision to keep him on the field isn't about production, it's about identity, leadership, and the belief that even injured, he brings something intangible that Mason Rudolph can't replicate. But the longer he plays through pain, the more it opens the door to the uncomfortable question, is this hurting the team more than helping? You can sense that the locker room wants Rodgers out there, but you can also sense that if he struggles early against Chicago, the tension could spike fast. This isn't just a quarterback choice, it's a culture test, it's a belief test, and it's the type of decision that either rallies a team or fractures it in slow motion. Then there's Darius Slay versus James Pierre, a battle that feels like it has reached a crossroads. Slay has shown improvements, yes, especially in off coverage and certain split safety looks, but Pierre has been consistently impressive. The coaching staff knows it, the fan base knows it, and even the players have hinted at it. Yet Slay continues to get the benefit of the doubt because of contract, experience, and the hope that he can turn the corner before the investment becomes a liability. But confidence is earned, not granted, and if Slay struggles early against Chicago, the argument to keep him on the field becomes nearly impossible to justify. Pierre is no longer the underdog fighting for a chance. He's the guy waiting for the staff to acknowledge what he's already put on tape: reliability, discipline, and strong execution in a scheme that's finally playing to his strengths. On offense, the friction around the wide receiver room still lingers because the ripple effect of the George Pickens situation didn't vanish when he left. Roman Wilson stepping into the WR2 role brings energy and optimism, but it also brings pressure. Pressure to produce, pressure to grow faster than expected, pressure to justify the shift that Rodgers himself seems to have influenced. And while Roman has earned his shot, the system hasn't made life easy for him or Calvin Austin III. Quick game-heavy designs, limited YAC opportunities, and a vertical attack that rarely has time to develop make it difficult for speed players to show what they can really do. That's why blaming production strictly on the receivers misses the point. The structure of the offense is part of the issue. And if the Steelers don't stretch the field at least a little more against Chicago, they risk letting the Bears compress everything, suffocate the short zones, and turn every drive into a slog. The last layer to all of this is Jabril Peppers. His situation is baffling because he has played well every time he's been asked to play safety. The tape proves it, the performance metrics prove it, even the locker room seems to understand his value. But for reasons that remain unclear, he continues to sit behind Chuck Clark on the depth chart. In a league where versatility is currency, Peppers offers a skill set that Pittsburgh simply isn't tapping into right now. And while Ramsey and Duggar have locked down their roles, Peppers is too good of a player to ignore, especially in a matchup against a quarterback like the one Chicago will put on the field, a player who can be forced into mistakes with the right disguises and personnel packages. So as the Steelers move toward kickoff, everything we've talked about, Rodgers' health, ASJ's future, Pierre's push for more snaps, Roman Wilson's emergence, Peppers' questionable usage, forms one central question: is this team making decisions to survive the week or to build momentum for the rest of the season? Picking up the moment the tension peaks, this is where the season's pulse really starts to hammer, because everything the Steelers are dealing with right now funnels into one unavoidable truth: the margin for error is disappearing. What happens in Chicago won't just determine a single win or loss, it will validate or expose every decision this coaching staff has made over the past month. And the closer we get to kickoff, the louder the questions grow around the Rodgers situation. You can feel it in the locker room. You can feel it in the fan base. The team is sticking with him, and that choice says everything about how much weight his leadership carries. But leadership only works when the performance holds up enough to justify the sacrifice. If Rodgers comes out sharp, commands the offense, and protects the ball, the entire building will feel that lift. If he comes out forcing throws, sailing passes, or looking hesitant because of the wrist, the anxiety will hit immediately, and the pressure to turn to Mason Rudolph becomes very real. That decision could arrive faster than people think if the game starts sliding early, and that's where the stakes lie. Does Rodgers silence the noise, or does the noise take over the game? Then there's the defensive backfield, which has quietly become one of the most intriguing storylines of the week. The idea of rotating Darius Slay and James Pierre isn't just strategy, it's a statement about what this staff expects in crunch time. Pierre has earned more snaps. There's no debate there. He's been consistent, disciplined, and reliable. But Slay is the high-investment player who flashes in certain situations, and that keeps earning him chances. Now with Ramsey and Duggar locking down the middle of the field, outside corner play becomes even more important against the Bears team that will take deep shots if Pittsburgh gives them the look. If Slay blows an early assignment, the staff won't have the luxury of waiting for him to settle in. Not in this game. Not in this moment. Pierre's leash is longer than Slay's right now, and that alone tells a story about trust. And speaking of trust, the wide receiver room is entering a defining week. Roman Wilson stepping into that WR2 spot created a shift that the offense desperately needed, but that shift only matters if the coaching staff actually lets him play the role. Roman's efficiency has been there all season, yards per target, route sharpness, body control, but the volume hasn't been. That's not on him. It's on the structure of the offense. Too many quick throws that don't let deeper routes develop. Too many timing calls that end before Wilson or Austin can use their speed. Too few plays designed to threaten vertically. If the Steelers continue to force a compressed passing game, Chicago will load up against it, sit on the short windows, and choke off the rhythm before it even begins. This is exactly the type of matchup where Pittsburgh must give Roman at least 2 or 3 true chances to stretch the field, even if they don't all hit. They have to show the Bears they're willing to challenge them. Otherwise, the offense becomes predictable, and predictable is death on the road. Even the Peppers situation could become a factor this week. Chicago's quarterback can be baited into mistakes, and Peppers' aggressive style is perfect for disguises, rotations, and downhill reactions. Yet he remains behind Chuck Clark, who has struggled at times in deep coverage. If one broken tackle or mistimed read turns into a big play early, it becomes impossible to justify keeping a more dynamic option on the sideline. Peppers may not be the centerpiece of the game plan, but he absolutely could be the difference in a critical moment if the staff decides to trust him. And hovering above all of this is the Asante Samuel Jr. situation. The Steelers don't want to lose him. Fans don't want to lose him, and yet the current depth chart practically invites another team to make him an offer. A single practice squad elevation this week sends a message: you're part of this. Not elevating him sends another message entirely: we're not sure. In a week as important as this, clarity matters, for the team, for the player, and for the future of the secondary. Every decision, every snap, every rotation on Sunday will carry weight. And that's what makes this moment electric, because this isn't just a Week 12 game. This is the hinge point of the Steelers' season, where all the questions raised in the mailbag turn into answers, good or bad, on the field. So now that we're heading into this showdown with everything on the line, I want to know what you think. Which decision, Rodgers starting, the cornerback rotation, the WR2 shift, or the handling of Peppers and ASJ, will define this game the most? And this is where everything tightens, because once the Steelers step onto that field in Chicago, all the speculation, all the internal debates, all the cautious optimism and quiet frustration turn into something that can't be talked around anymore: performance, execution, reality. The choices this staff has made over the past several weeks are either going to prove they were building towards something, or reveal that they've been patching holes and hoping it holds long enough to survive. The Rodgers storyline, more than anything else, feels like the one that could swing the entire emotional weight of the game. If he comes out with command, hitting timing throws, buying just enough space in the pocket, trusting his progressions, showing even flashes of the early season rhythm, it pulls the whole team forward. The receivers play faster, the line digs in harder, the defense feeds off the energy. But if the wrist limits him on the first couple of drives, if throws start dying on him or drifting high, the frustration will hit quickly. This team knows what Mason Rudolph did in that second half. They know there's a safety net, and that's what makes this moment so fragile. Rodgers doesn't just have to win the game, he has to win the room again. Across the field, the defensive identity is also about to be tested. Ramsey and Duggar have been the stabilizing force in the secondary, but what happens on the outside will define how aggressive they can be. If Slay holds up, it unlocks flexibility. If he struggles, it forces the defense into more conservative shells, giving Chicago opportunities they wouldn't normally get. Pierre stepping in could shift the entire flow of the game, because his reliability allows the safeties to play faster and the front seven to attack without worrying about cleanup duty on the boundary. And that decision, when to rotate, how long to ride the hot hand, how short the leash truly is, will be one of the most fascinating chess matches of the night. Offensively, the WR2 battle carries its own weight. Roman Wilson taking on a bigger role is more than personnel. It's an admission that the offense needed a spark from someone who plays fast and thinks fast. But giving him the role and actually feeding him the role are two different things. If Pittsburgh keeps the passing game compressed, if they never stretch the field or force the Bears to defend every blade of grass, Roman's impact shrinks. Calvin Austin's speed becomes neutralized. DK Metcalf gets bracketed with ease. And suddenly every drive becomes a 10-play grind. The Steelers can't live like that on the road. They need one or two plays where Roman or CA3 forces Chicago into panic mode adjustments. That's how you open up everything else. And even though Peppers isn't the headline name, the truth is that he might end up being one of the most important pieces. One aggressive downhill tackle on 3rd and short. One disguised rotation that leads to a rushed throw. One snap where he replaces Clark and instantly changes the tempo. Games like this often swing on those subtle pivots, not the big names, but the decisions that unlock or restrict matchups in the margins. All of these threads, Rodgers fighting through injury, Slay and Pierre battling for trust, Roman Wilson stepping into a defining moment, Peppers waiting to be used the way he should be, Asante Samuel Jr. hanging in limbo, collide in a single night that could either steady the Steelers' season or push it toward turbulence. Chicago isn't the kind of opponent you can overlook. They're the kind of opponent that punishes indecision, hesitation, and half measures. And that's exactly why this matchup is a mirror. The Steelers are about to see exactly who they are when every decision comes due on the field instead of the mailbag. And now it's your turn. I want your thoughts right now. Which of these storylines do you believe will shape not just the game, but the direction of the season from this point forward? And if you're still with me at this point, you're exactly the kind of fan this channel is built for. So make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you drop a like to push this video out to more Steelers Nation. And stick around, the next video is already queued up on your screen. Here we go. And the truth is, as all these moving parts come together, what really stands out is how much emotion sits under the surface of every one of these decisions. You can sense the urgency coming through the conversations in that mailbag. You can sense that the fan base feels it. You can sense that the players feel it. No one is pretending this is just another stretch of the season. Not with the roster reshuffling the way it has. Not with the quarterback fighting through injuries that everyone sees. Not with young receivers stepping into roles that were supposed to look different months ago. What makes this moment so compelling is that everything the Steelers have been wrestling with has led to a crossroads. Not a dramatic one rooted in chaos, but one built on recognition. Recognition of who's earning snaps. Recognition of who the offense flows through. Recognition of how the secondary needs to evolve. Recognition of which players are pushing upward and which ones are hanging on by name, contract, or reputation. And recognition, especially in the middle of a season, is powerful. It forces honesty. It forces the coaching staff to acknowledge what the tape is telling them. It forces players to respond to opportunities or watch them pass to someone else. It forces the organization to double down on its choices or pivot before those choices cost them momentum they can't get back. That's why this game in Chicago feels like more than a matchup. It's a checkpoint. It's the moment where we find out whether the internal conversations highlighted in that mailbag were simply discussions, or the beginning of a turn in the season's trajectory. Because every fan watching knows exactly how this works. There are games you win because you're better, and there are games you win because you handle the pressure better. And this, everything we've been breaking down, falls squarely into that second category. When the Steelers take the field, we're going to see whether the plan around Rodgers holds. We're going to see how quickly the staff adjusts at corner. We're going to see if Roman Wilson really is ready to carry a bigger share of the offense. We're going to see whether Peppers gets deployed in a moment where the defense needs a spark. And we're going to see whether this team looks like one that's tightening its identity, or still searching for it in the middle of November. And that's why this specific stretch of the season has fans locked in right now. Because every storyline we've discussed, every bit of tension, every bit of uncertainty, every bit of optimism, is about to translate into football decisions that will either confirm the direction of this team or force the staff to reassess everything again when the dust settles. So before you click onto the next video, I want to hear it from you. After everything we've unpacked, everything that's swirling around this roster, and everything that's at stake heading into Chicago, what's the one thing you believe cannot go wrong if the Steelers want to walk out with the win? And continuing from that exact moment, because this is where the story tightens even further, where every thread we've been following pulls into a single question of identity, urgency, and execution. At this stage, nothing the Steelers do is happening in a vacuum anymore. Every rotation, every snap count, every adjustment on either side of the ball is a reflection of all the internal conversations we saw poured out in that mailbag. And that's what makes this moment so defining. The team isn't just preparing for a game, they're confronting the consequences of every decision they've made to reach this point. What becomes clear the closer we look is that this roster is full of players sitting at critical pivot points in their seasons. Think about how that impacts the energy inside the building. Players who have been waiting for opportunities, guys who have outperformed expectations, who have quietly put together tape that deserves more snaps. They feel this is their chance to claim long-term roles. At the same time, established veterans who haven't played to their expected level feel the weight of knowing the staff is watching every rep with sharper scrutiny than before. These moments create a current that runs through a team, and you can sense that current in the discussions around quarterback usage, wide receiver roles, and even defensive rotations. And yes, it all loops back to Rodgers as well, because when your quarterback is pushing through injuries, playing through pain, and still being tasked with leading a team toward the postseason, his performance becomes the lens through which every other decision is interpreted. If he finds rhythm early, everything stabilizes. If he struggles, every choice everywhere else becomes magnified. Does the staff shift to quicker concepts? Does the offense lean heavier into timing throws? Do the receivers adjust their depths to compensate? That kind of domino effect is real, and it's exactly the type of thing that defines tight, competitive road games late in the season. The defense mirrors that same pressure. Ramsey and Duggar have set the tone in the secondary, but the question is whether the pieces around them can elevate the ceiling of the unit. If Slay delivers a clean, disciplined game, the entire structure benefits. If Pierre steps in and continues his strong form, the communication stabilizes. If Peppers gets a chance and brings that edge he's known for, the momentum can shift instantly. That's what makes this one so intriguing. The Bears don't need to dominate to cause problems, they just need one mismatch to exploit. One slow adjustment from Pittsburgh, one miscommunication on the back end. It's the kind of matchup where a single decision at corner